Johnson has been the guitarist for some of the biggest names in rock and roll, touring the world and leaving his mark on legendary stages alongside iconic artists and top bands. A world-class musician at the heart of some rock history, but also an artist who has consistently written, performed, and produced his own music on his own terms, building a body of solo work that reflects his true creative spirit and legacy.
Johnson, I've always liked his playing. This might sound kind of funny, but he kind of reminds me of me in a reckless abandon kind of playing. But he's kind of a cross between me, Alan Holdsworth, and himself, you know, and he's very blues oriented, and I love his playing.
Well, I was born there, so I didn't know anything different. I just love Louisiana. You know, I live in Texas now, near Austin, but Louisiana. And you know, the hayride, and goes back to the hayride. Elvis Presley lived there, Levi and the Rockettes lived there. Everybody played the hayride. I mean, it was before my time, but, you know, Johnny Cash started there, Elvis used to open up for Hank Williams. I think I was about 11, and there was a babysitter, and she said, if I'm gonna babysit, by the way, I got 5 brothers, one of them passed away, but there were 6 of us then, and she said, if I'm gonna babysit all these boys, I'm gonna put the TV on the Ed Sullivan tonight and watch the Beatles. And we had been watching the commercials, and we look at those sissies with long hair. They had on shorts and ties, and we thought they were sissies. And then when they came on, and I saw those girls screaming, that was it, man. You know, I had the fever. I knew what I wanted to do. I just didn't know how to do it. I had another cousin that was, you know, he was more of a playboy, you know. And he kept getting stuck in the mud and asking my daddy to pull him out because he was, back then they called it parking or sparking or whatever, right? And so he got stuck, and he asked my daddy, can you come get me out to Lake Pisano? He said, that's 60 miles. I got to drive a winch truck all the way out there to get your ass. And I've done this before. So if I do it, you're going to teach that boy how to play guitar. And so that was my early lessons.
Back to New Orleans, went by Texas spring. Back down to the bon ton, babies and feet in the hand. Dance the Mississippi River, Cajun moon and a field playing in the liver.
You know, we were 15, 16 years old. We couldn't get in. Well, we'd get dropped off, and we'd sit out in the front of the clubs and listen to Jerry Beach at the Kims, and we'd go listen to the Whiskey Go-Go, listen to the bands out in front. We couldn't get in, but after the clubs, after they finished playing, they'd come out and we'd get to meet the guys in the band, and that's where we met Jerry Beach, because that guy was really good back in the day. That's where we're all learning from, you know. He got Danny started and playing all that good rock and roll. When Jerry Beach wrote the I Play the Blues for You, it freaked us all out. Even Susie Q, all those songs right there were our local guys. And they were pretty famous, and they really did real good for all the musicians because we got the feel. We felt it. We said, oh, okay, look, we want to do that. We want to do that. We want to do what they do.
But I came in to visit one time, and his little band that he had, Axis, was performing at Kim's, and I went to see him, and that's when I realized that my brother was very talented, you know, and then of course, he just got better and better.
Beck, Page, Blackmore, and of course James Burton. I mean, I had a dinner with Jeff Beck one night at the Rainbow. Well, he came up and said, "Can I sit at your table?" I didn't even know him. I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because you got all the girls at your table." And so we sat and talked, and I asked him, "Who inspired you?" And he said, "James Burton from Shreveport, Louisiana."
Yeah.
He started it all, him and Steve Cropper.
This morning got myself out of bed, then hit the ground and run. I was thinking about something you said. Did someone make me trip and fall into a stone? I want to rumble with you. You know you spark me. Called a sugar shack, dancing in the front and fighting in the back. Everybody's joking and having a good time. Bands playing loud, but they're rolling and tumbling. I want to rumble with you. You know you spark me.
Well, Dark Horse was one of the top, when I was a kid. It was the Blue Shadows first, and then a band called Rain with Pat Huddleston that was like Traffic. I mean, these were world-class bands that never made it. And then when Blue Shadows broke up, some of the members formed a band called Dark Horse. And you know, I never dreamed that I would wind up in that band, but I did. Me and Jay did. We went until we were playing a club one night on the Bossier Strip. I think it was Kim's. And the cops came in and busted the bass player. It was a John Doe. They didn't even know his name. And so it kind of killed the band. The club owner told us to get the hell out, it emptied the room when they came. They walked on the stage, and they looked like me, or a rocker or something. I said, "Do you want to jam or something?" And he flashed a badge and said, "Keep your mouth shut." And the other guitar player wouldn't stop talking, and so I looked, and the whole audience was gone. And the club owner's name was Red. He had red hair. And when he walked up there, his head was so red, he said, "Get out of here and never come back." So that was the end of that gig. We want to be the cream. We want a drummer that's, who do you know? Do you know Carmine Appice? She said, "Yeah, but you can't get him. But he's got a little brother. He's 17. Do you have his phone number?" And she gave me his number. I was in Houston. We had already been to Austin looking for drummers. We talked to Bubble Puppy's drummer. We went to Houston. We auditioned drummers. And when we started playing, most of them, we were kind of a bluesy rock version of Rush, without all the high singing and yeah. But I called Vinny, and he said, "Yeah, I heard about you guys from this girl named Georgia." I said, "Good." He said, "What do you want?" I said, "Well, I want a star drummer, like the Cream. When do you want me there?" And that was what got him.
They were looking for a drummer, and someone recommended, of course, Vinny Appice. And Vinny flew in and to audition with the band, and I was with Danny the day that we went to the airport to pick Vinny up. I think he was only 17 or 18 years old.
"I'll have drums for you, we'll fly you down here." And he came to the Union Hall. I had my brother's drums. He broke this snare drum in half. I mean, it literally, I'd never seen anybody break drums. And he played a couple of songs. He said, "I'm going to go in the office and make a phone call." He went in there and he called his mother and said, or whoever, "Send my drums down here." And so that was the axis that landed the RCA deal. And Vinny became a big part of it with the arrangements and just the sound and everything. And we got Andy Johns to produce us. He had just done Stairway to Heaven, and we did it at the record plant. We had a real budget, from borrowing people's tape recorders to getting a $100,000 budget, And then Led Zeppelin had just done Stairway to Heaven in Studio C at the record plant, and we started off there. And it burned down. And so we had to go to New York to the other record plant. For once, we had all the best of everything. And I was sad that album didn't have a radio hit. We didn't have the money for promotion, and we didn't get a good tour. Agency problems, management problems, they're the ones that make all that happen. I think it went like this. I might not have it to the T, but he told me that he was in a hotel room and someone knocked on her door, and when he looked through the peephole, they were holding up the Axis album, and he opened the door and it was Tony Iommi. He said, "This is good."
And then Rick Derringer called my house and said to my mother, "Hi, this is Rick Derringer. I want to talk to Vinny." This is funny. My mother said, "Oh, no, you want to talk to Carmine." So, he says, "No, I want to talk to Vinny." And she said it again, "You want to talk to Carmine?" He said, "No, I know Carmine. He's my friend. I want to talk to Vinny. I'm starting a new band, and I'm thinking of using Vinny in the band." So Vinny got in, and then I guess Vinny brought Danny in. I didn't bring Kenny. I didn't bring Jay because they already had Kenny Aronson. So then that started the band Derringer. in which Rick took him out on tour, and they opened up for Aerosmith in stadiums. And my brother was still in high school. It sounded great, and Danny was, you know, playing with Rick and doing guitar exchanges with Rick. And, you know, Rick is a great player. So Danny, he held up pretty good against Rick, you know?
This is Danny Johnson. Who is this? This is Steve Paul, calling from New York City. And I knew all about him. He managed Rick, he managed Johnny and Edgar, David Johansen, everybody. And he had them all on his own record company called Blue Sky Records, distributed by CBS. And I said, yeah, what can I do for you? He said, Rick really likes your playing. We want you to come to New York. I go, well, I kind of have a band. I'm the main writer. Is there really room for me? If you do this, I'll make sure you get at least one song on every album, maybe two, and get to sing a little. Okay, I'm more interested now. He said, I've already bought your tickets. You leave tomorrow at 2 o'clock. The limo will pick you up at LaGuardia. And I'm like, I'm just a little hick from Shreveport. I never rode in a limo. And then when we got to SIR Studios to start rehearsing, Johnny Winter was in one room, David Bowie was in one room, and I'm like, wow, you know. I would say to Rick, when are we gonna take another break? Because I would go invade their rooms, you know. Like I'd go over to Johnny's room and watch him, and as long as you clap for him and say something good, you're okay, you know. The thing I regret about our musical relationship was we never co-wrote a song. I mean, he helped my, like Driving Sideways. Steve Paul would take us to see punk music and all this music that we didn't even like. But he wanted us to know there's other things out there. And they took me to see Bob Marley. I don't like reggae. I'm a 19-year-old rocker. I like Led Zeppelin. Take me to Aerosmith. But when I watched Bob Marley, just that hypnotic music and that rhythm, I thought, what if I wrote a song that has like a real heavy riff, and in the verses it goes sort of into a reggae rhythm? And I told Rick that. He said, oh, God, that's a great idea. And so he came up with the bass line. And Rick was a good bass player. I mean, if you play guitar, you have to be able to play bass a little bit. When we talk about Derringer, you can't leave out Liz Derringer. She did so much for me.
She's still with us, right? Liz is. Liz is around.
Anyhow, she took me to get rock clothes. She taught me how to hail a cab. She taught me how to ride a subway. She taught me how to be a New Yorker. And boy, was she a New Yorker. And I just reached out to her yesterday and told her, you know, I've always loved you and I always will. Because Rick was introverted. And Liz was the one that knew everybody. I mean, not just the rockers. I met people through her, Truman Capote, Andy Warhol, movie stars. I mean, when we played gigs in New York, we opened for Aerosmith for 2 nights at Madison Square Gardens, sold out. But when we went in the dressing room, Hall & Oates was in there, John Belushi, just went on and on and on. And all those people went over to Rick's house to party. And then Aerosmith showed up at Rick's house. And he had a brownstone near the Village on 13th Street. So it wasn't that big, but he had a little studio in the back. And I was so overwhelmed, I just went out there by myself I just, you know. And so when I went out there to play, John Belushi came out and said, hey, can I jam with you? Yeah. And then Steven Tyler said, hey, can I play drums? And then somebody was on the piano, and David Johansen, when he wasn't passed out, he was playing harmonica. I mean, I was tapping a long time ago, but not like Eddie. Rick Derringer called me in a frantic, Danny, have you read Eddie's book? No. He said I stole the tapping from him, but I got that from you in the mid-'70s. Right? I said, right. Rick's another one I'd take a bullet for. Whatever he wanted, he got. And he was so mad that Eddie could be a punk. He said, yeah, Rick Derringer copied me. He went on tour with us, and I did my solo, and the next night he was doing all the same stuff. Rick's a guitar machine. Like I had said before, we toured the country 4 months on the road, so we got to know him. So one day I get a call, and it's Brad Whitford, and I'm in California with actually no agenda. Hey, Brad, what's up? And he was him-hawing around. Well, we hadn't been getting along with Joe real good. Really? Well, y'all can work that out. No, that's not going to work out. You want to come to New York and jam with us? Sure. Can we make that happen? When can you get here? Tomorrow? They put me in a, fancy plaza or something like that. I just remember it was nice. And I said, what do we do next? They said, everybody's sleeping. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Like if I hung out with one member and his wife, I'd go over to talk to them. What are you hanging out with them for? In other words, they had gone completely dysfunctional. And they had their wives with them all the time. And none of them were getting along. We would come back to the hotel at 7. And so we had 2 days set up to rehearse at SIR. And Stephen, Joe, I didn't think about it, but Joe Perry sings the main harmony, and he can't sing very high, so he sings under. He sings under. Instead of a major third or a fifth over, he would sing like a fifth under, and that's that sound. And I didn't think to practice that. And, I mean, while I'm putting the guitar on, nervous as hell, standing 4 inches from Steven Tyler, he's going, Steven, at the first gig, if this doesn't go well, I'm quitting. I'm going, wow, that's great inspiration. Thank you, Joey, you piece of shit mother. And Jimmy got the gig. And in hindsight, I'm glad he did, because I wound up in a band with Jimmy. It was me, Jimmy, Kenny Aronson, Carmine Appice, and we were doing this sort of raw experience thing. And so I asked him how it went. Jimmy's a very disciplined guy. I think he maybe drinks a little vodka. And he said, Danny, it would have killed you. And the last time I talked to Brad, I was in LA, and him and Tom called and said, are you still going to meetings? I said, yes, I am. And I was sober, and they said, would you take us to one? And my car wouldn't start. They said, we're at the Palms waiting on the side of the thing for you. I said, my car won't start. It's up at Doug Feiger's house. The Bandits, well, after Derringer, I was in Shreveport, and I went into a club or something and ran into a friend of mine, a drummer, good drummer, Glenn Graves. And he said, you want to come over after? Yeah. And he said, why don't you do a solo thing? I had never thought about it. In other words, I didn't know what I was going to do next. I was just going to try to find another big gig, if there was another one out there. It's not like they grow on trees. But he kind of inspired me. I actually wrote that in California with it, playing drums, walking through the park. And so we had a drummer, and he was so busy. When we produced it, I think you were there, Pasha, and helped produce. We had to take all his drums and cymbals away from him, you know, because he wouldn't stop. And he's very successful now, Jay Shellen. He plays for Yes. And I took all his drums away from him. I can't get him on the phone anymore, no. But then we overdubbed the floor toms, and then we shot the video in Shreveport. We had a big following and told them, hey, we're gonna do a video here. Anybody wants to be on the video? And so we packed the house, and so we were playing the Whiskey and the Starwood and, you know, all the places.
Gonna make it feel right. In my dreams, won't you in my arms? Don't know what you're doing to me.
I actually played with him at the same time. Didn't go over well. I played with him at the same time because Rod was more of a day guy and he had children and he liked to quit rehearsals. We were rehearsing for a tour, I think. And he liked to quit at about 5, which is happy hour, and we'd go up and drink. And he had his own bar and bartender. And then I'd go home. Sometimes the phone would ring. Hello, hey Danny, it's Alice. Can you come over? God, I just got back. It's okay. And I'd go over there and we'd start at midnight and go till 10 in the morning. And then I'd sometimes drive straight to the record plant to Rod's session. And everything was going good until he found me in the room with my guitar and everything. I was laying on my back asleep at a Rod Stewart session. He said, I got 2 other guitar players, so me getting guitar players is not much of a problem. Putting 3 guitar players, 2 from England and 1 from Louisiana, and all heavy drinkers. I didn't drink back then or do nothing. And one of Rod's sidekicks called me and said, you know, you need to drink with us. I said, Jim, you guys are all alcoholics. He said, it's just the first year that's a little rough. You'll get used to it. And so I didn't fit in. In other words, I could do the music, and Rod liked me to play the acoustic. He said, would you play the acoustic on some of my hits? Because I like your strum. And so I played acoustics and had about 5 guitars. I played the Les Paul and, you know, on some of the heavy stuff. And it was a great experience. I gotta tell you, I enjoyed working with Alice way more because, for one thing, he was super nice. You know, he would come to the studio and he would, hey, gentlemen. Whereas Rod Stewart, he would take us to the Dome or something next door is a bar. We'd get shit-faced. He'd say, let's go back and record. And we would record something. He'd go, man, this is so good. And he'd be on his microphone, rock it, baby, rock it. You know, we're just cranking it, cranking it, cranking. We're all drunk. And the next day, I walk in the studio and he's like, oh God, a band member. You know what I mean? Like, you want to hear something that really sounds like shit? Come in here, guys. And he put the thing, you told us we were great. You told us it was a tape. Of course, I didn't say that. Richie Podler, oh God. He's another one. He produced everybody out of the 60s on the West Coast, you know, from Three Dog Night, Steppenwolf. It goes on and on and on. But I did a bunch of albums with him, and I brought him some albums. I brought him Alcatraz. And I loved him. He was just great. But he was producing, he told Alice, I'm gonna get this guy over here. And he's not going to smoke your coke. He won't do that with you, not at a session. And so I came over and we started doing the album, and I had to literally erase over some of the other parts, and I hated doing it because some of them were my friends, but you got to do it. And I probably had it done to me too. But he wanted me to join his band, and he wanted me to help lead the band. I said, why me? He said, I don't like to be the bad guy. I just want to tell you what to tell them. I said, I'm with Rod. And he was practicing with these ice picks for his next tour. And he had a bullseye thing out there because Richie used to like to shoot guns in the studio and bow and arrows. So we had a big thing, you know. And he said, what do I have to do? Go do this to Rod Stewart and take my ice picks to him? And that's like the biggest compliment I ever got from Rod Stewart, you know. I remember Alice saying a couple of things like, stop sitting down. Okay. I stood up. He said, how loud does that amp go? I said, it goes to 10. Turn it to 12. And when you play, I want to see it. I go, we're in the studio. I can focus better. He said, my people know the difference. They know the difference between a studio musician and a rocker. You stand up and rock. So I had to, you know, not only play the part, but, you know, move and shake. But he's so theatrical, and I love that about him. I loved it, you know. Yeah, everybody. I mean, the Cream were good, what, 40 years ago? I mean, how do you top that? But ever since I was a kid, you know, I like theatrics, you know. What else? Well, there's a bass player, there's 2 guitar players and a drummer. Yeah, so is 40 million bands. What else?
I like to flex my arms in the neon light. I'm a queen on the street and a king.
I'm trying to get back out there, and he said, well, you know, Alcatraz just lost a guitar. Who's Alcatraz? Well, they just lost Steve Vai. Who's Steve Vai? Well, he replaced Eddie Van Halen's thing. Wingnut, what? And so I didn't know who these guys were. If I would have said, I'm probably not your guy. They said, Danny, that Marshall 100 with that one bottom is not going to cut it. You need 2 or 3. In the rehearsal room, Graham's not even using monitors. But he could sing over the sound, Marshalls and everything, with no monitors. His neck, I mean, he's a real singer and a lovely guy. I love that man. And his lyrics, I used to write with him. I remember the first day, they said the guitar player's more the leader than Graham. I said, okay. And so they said, you're gonna start writing the guitar player. Graham only writes with the guitar player. And you start tomorrow. I said, okay. So I called him up. I said, I'm gonna head your way. Is there anything I can get you? And they said, whatever you do, don't bring him beer. And I said, is there anything I can get you? He said, yeah, I need some Pampers for my kid and some cigarettes. Oh yeah, and a 6-pack. And I got the 6-pack. And my theory was, I'm not gonna work with an alcoholic jonesing, you know what I'm saying? So the next day, the guys heard, Graham said y'all wrote 2 complete songs yesterday. How did you do it? But I never told him I took the 6-pack. It was like hanging out with Mozart, you know. I would be like 2 or 3 feet from him when he was playing the guitar, you know. I would say, hey, show me what you want me to do. And he would play something that was way out of my toolbox. And his finesse, he played very light, with light strings. And so did Steve Vai. I worked with him a little bit. He helped rehearse me into Alcatraz. But Eddie, you know, we were both going through some stuff with drugs and alcohol, and so I was going to AAs and CAs and anything with an A on the end of it. And so I got him going to this special place that Doug Feiger had that was rock stars only. And he really liked that meeting. I mean, I don't want to name names, but everybody was there. Everybody, I mean, if you walked in the room, you'd go, oh, yeah, no, I know him. And, but anonymity, so I don't want to do that. But somebody brought their nephew, and he shared, and he said, I stood in line at the DMV today, and it made me want to use. And when we left, Eddie said, yeah, my dad died at 53. I don't want to die at 53. I don't want to hear stuff like that. You know, what's my bottom out? I know, Eddie, you got all your money, you're famous, but you might not wake up one morning. But his theory was, Danny, life is not a bitch, it's a beach. That was his slogan, life is a beach. And he basically gave the world all this incredible music and incredible guitar playing, but it killed him. I mean, because he always wanted to be in a good mood. Sometimes it's hard to be in a good mood without a little enhancement, but that enhancement is the beginning of the end, usually. So many people. I was friends with Valerie, But with Eddie, I would do anything for him. He would call me at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, I've been with you producing songs and working on the album. Ring, 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 it's Valerie. Have you been with Eddie tonight? Yes. I lied for him. He said, bring beer and put it in the bushes. I did that. Anything he asked. And anything, you know, there was one I had a problem. And I don't want to talk about what it was, but it was kind of expensive. And he called me and said, well, I'm so gloomy. I got a problem. He said, come over to the house. And he shook my hand with $5,000 in it. He says, now go fix your problem. You need more? That's the kind of guy he was. He was constantly trying to help guitar players that were struggling. He did that with Alan Holdsworth. He did that with some other guys. I remember one day, Eddie was trying to get us a rockin' solo out of me. And Ted was right there. And, you know, it was just not, I was just not there yet. And Ted said, Eddie, see, they had been separated from each other, Ted and Eddie, and Don Landy and Eddie were producing the record. So that kind of got them back together. And Templeman said, Eddie, would you play some guitar for us? And Eddie just picked up the guitar and he just started playing. It's just like, you know, unbelievable. I called him Monkey Fingers because he played with not just the back of his hand, the side of his hands, tapping, hitting. It's like unbelievable. I remember one time he walked out of the room and I'm like, oh, and I just started noodling. And then he turned around and walked right back. What are you doing? I go, I'm just doing a bunch of cliches. What do you call that? I don't know, the Shreveport sound? That's who you are. Quit trying to copy me and Steve Vai. I got news for you. You'll never top that. But why do you think we do all those tricks and stuff? We don't come from Louisiana. We don't have soul like that. And I went over to the side to watch him play, and I thought I heard my name. And the roadie tapped me on the shoulder and said, Sammy's calling you out there. What? At the Kingdom in Seattle. That's like, what, 60,000 people or something. And they want me out there? And I said to Zeke, is there anything, you got anything, you know? And Sammy said, bottom drawer, Jack Daniels. And then Sammy comes over there. I got no guitar, Sammy. And he took his guitar off and threw it on me. He said, get your ass out here. What song? The Who. What song by The Who? They never told me. They just went into my generation. And then I was standing back by Alex, kind of grooving on him. I had no idea he was as good as he was. I mean, when people referred to Van Halen, the people behind the scenes, they don't call them Van Halen, they call them the brothers, Eddie and Alex. And so he was like Charlie Watts, John Bonham, everything mixed in one. And Eddie and Sammy kept saying, come up here with us. And I'm going, I'm okay back here, kind of like, you're the stars. And you better come up here with us. And they were very adamant about it. And I said, no, I'm staying here. And a bomb blew off. And I was standing right over it, you know, boom. And I go, oh God, and it literally knocked me like this. And then Eddie said, go over there. Eddie could be like Spanky or Alfalfa. He liked pulling pranks on people. he said, why don't you go over there? And boom, I get blown off, and Sammy says, go over there. And the pyrotechnical guys ran backstage to see if I needed an ambulance. And they said, I'm sorry, Danny, but we have orders from the director. And he says, you want us to blow? Danny Johnson's standing right over the thing. It's time to blow. Just go ahead and blow. Here he is again. It's coming up, 10, 9, 8. No, Danny's still standing there, and boom. I mean, it must have happened 4 times. My hair, my face was black. And when I walked in that dressing room, Van Halen, every one of them, they were laughing their ass off, you know. It's like, when are you gonna ask me if I'm okay? But Eddie used to do stuff like that. He did an interview once with Guitar Magazine. I don't know, I probably shouldn't tell this, but
No, this is it. This is where to tell it.
you know, they were asking him how many tubes you use, what kind of tubes, your power soak, what do you set it on, how do you get this sound, that sound, and I read the interview. He was letting me use his rig when he produced me. So I knew everything about his rig. And I said, nothing you put in there is what you really do. And as a matter of fact, some of the stuff in there is gonna blow out amps. He said, wow, I'm not giving away my trade secrets. And he slaved over those secrets. He was a tone chaser. Overly nice to me.
So tell me.
But I would have taken a bullet for him.
No, I cried when he died.
And as a matter of fact, I got ran out of there because, you know, usually you have to watch the gates to make sure, you know, Valerie doesn't come in if you're doing something you shouldn't do. And Eddie he had a little bit of coke, and he kept begging me, here, do some of this, man. You know, because he was more of a drinker back then. And he just did a little of that to keep him away. No. If I'm gonna do some of that, I was more into drugs. At that point, I've been disciplined all my life, and then, I don't know, after my marriage busted up years and years and years with nobody policing me, you know. So I said, no, I'm not gonna do a line with you unless you give it all to me. And he said, here. And he handed it to me. We weren't watching the gates. I put it up to my nose, the door opens, it's Valerie. And she said, you know, my husband's a drug addict and an alcoholic, don't you, Danny? Yeah. I guess this is goodbye. And that was it.
So you want to know about Danny Johnson, huh? I think the first time I was aware of Danny was around 1980. I saw Danny Johnson and the Bandits at the Whiskey, and I remember thinking, holy fuck, this is a very good guitar player. I mean, I knew I had been around very good guitar players before then, and I recognized that in Danny. Then I probably ran into him again around 1986 when he was playing with Alcatrazz. My very good friend Jimmy Waldo was the founder of the band, and Danny was staying at Jimmy's house. I remember going over to Jimmy's one night, and Jimmy and I were working on a song. We wrote songs together, and Danny was there, and I said, hey man, would you play a solo? And he grabbed, I think I was rocking a pig nose or something, man. I had some Strat, and first time through, man, he laid down this beautifully melodic, screaming solo. And that's when I knew that, wow, this guy is a really good guitar player. Then a couple of years later, Danny joins Private Life, and he's being produced by Edward Van Halen, whom I knew from way back in 1977. I was actually writing a book about Edward at the time, a book that would later come out called Tone Chaser. And I knew that if Edward was spending time with a band and a guitar player, that this had to be an amazing band, and they were. Danny was incredible. He sort of straddled that classic rock thing, that kind of that amazing melodic thing that Jeff Beck had with a more, ripping kind of thing that Page had, and, some of the more modern guitar players. An incredibly good guitar player, probably undersung, and then he'd become part of Steppenwolf and play all those incredible Steppenwolf songs, Born to Be Wild and Pusher and all of that great stuff. Exceptionally good guitar player, and no one more deserving of a documentary than Danny Johnson. So there you go.
Speaking of Tone Chaser, my friend Stephen Rosen wrote this book called Tone Chaser. He was also a good friend of Eddie's. He was one of the top writers on the West Coast guitar writers. They needed a guitar player. And Richie said, I keep telling you about this kid from Louisiana that's got the blues roots, but he's a rocker and he's got a psychedelic edge. And John said, okay, let's go there. And so I get a call one day, hey, Danny, this is John Kay. He said, do you want to come to Nashville? We're based out of Nashville. So if you're interested in this gig, I won't call cattle call. If you'll come here over Christmas. And I'm going, Christmas? But what I didn't tell him was my kids lived in Nashville, and it was like a free trip to see my kids. Even if I don't get the gig, I'm going to Nashville. I said, I can do that. How many days you want? I think one, meaning like, if you don't. And so I learned one of their classics, Ride With Me. I don't know if it was a hit, but it was a slide tune. And just in case, he wanted me to play that song. And he said, well, just learn Suki Suki, like 3 songs. When we went there, we played the 3 songs they told me to learn. And he said, let's break, Danny, go out. And they were all smiling and everything. I said, you want to do Ride With Me? You know Ride With Me? An open tuning slide? Yeah. And we played that. And I think that was the one that won the Dan Electro. And he said, let's take a break. And they walked out of the room and came back and said, you got the gig. Close to 25 years. Somebody once asked me, does that get old? Like playing Born to Be Wild and Magic Carpet Ride and the Pusher in front of 20,000 people. It's the same thing every time you play it. It's like it's so exciting. It's like, does it get old playing Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo at the end of the gig? And everybody's singing the words? It never gets old for me.
Slow, I was all tore down, so I got my prescription let's get free. Thunder in the city, fire in the streets, saints, sinners, losers and winners. We all need to stop and breathe. Lean on me, lean on you. Lean on me, let's get free. Break free, set you free. Break free, set you free.
See, I play so much better. I didn't know you were filming me.
Oh, say that again.
Well, I shouldn't have the glasses on for one thing.
Ladies and gentlemen, now he's.
Okay.
This is just getting used to having a camera on you.
His style is like Lead Belly meets Jimi Hendrix. You know, it's like very country blues foundation, but then with this rock psychedelia on top of that. He definitely has his own style that's different than any other of the great rock guitar players that you know were his contemporaries. His style, you know, it's a Danny Johnson lick when you hear it. I think his style is completely 100% his own, even within the world of lead guitar player, because you know, he came up in the 70s and 80s when lead guitar player was the man. That was like the old Wild West gunfighter. They were revered even in the rock and roll world. And his style is such a gumbo of the blues and rock and roll and aggressiveness mixed with sort of a laissez-faire attitude. It's just nobody else really ever catches it like he catches it. When he plays a solo, it doesn't sound like anyone else's. It's not contrived. Other people try to sound like him. He doesn't try to sound like other people.
Music was a part of everything in our lives with my dad. I don't remember it not being a part of things, you know. Dad was always playing the guitar, and whether we were sitting at the dinner table or watching a TV show or, you know, all gathered around, there was always a guitar and always music involved. Whether he meant to or not, I think the biggest thing I would probably glean from my dad and his life and his, fatherly advice is just, if you love something, then give it your all. And if you want to be good at something, then give it your all. And you have to live it, you have to eat it, you have to breathe it. And he did, and he set a great example for that.
She goes to church on Sundays. He still likes to roam. They roll with the bunches when times are tough. Living in the house alone, stuck in a broken world. We all need a fix. Faith, hope, peace, and harmony. That's what we need. I saw the smoke rise from the vine, and then I knew the flames couldn't get no higher. Dream about the house and love scheme. I just can't get enough. Dreaming about the house and love. Now you wanna say goodbye. Look at the tears in your eyes. Oh, we got the good stuff. Come with me, I'll set you free. Living in the house of love.
On the second Private Life album produced by Eddie Van Halen, I said, we did a song, Rockabye Angel. I said, hey, it'd be nice to have a harpsichord because, it's about angels. What is that? The thing your teacher played at school, and he said, okay, I'll pay for it. You can have it when you're done, but you got to tune it. And it's got 42 strings, and it's hell to pay to get it in tune.
One time, he told Daddy he had to go to practice. He was a grown man by then, and he told my dad, he said, well, I'm leaving, I've got to go to practice. And Daddy said, practice? My goodness, you should know everything by now. And also, Danny is a very humble person. He's, when he gets up on that stage, though, with that guitar, he's not. He lets the audience have it.
When we were in the Bandits, we did a record with Richie Podler, American Studios, that did Ride Captain Ride, Steppenwolf, so many big Blues Image, so many bands. Well, we did a whole record, and it was going to be released, and we were fixing to get a deal with Polydor Records. As a matter of fact, we were signed to Polydor, and something happened to that deal. But I think it's what happened is Rod Stewart wanted Danny, he wanted Danny real bad, and he offered him some real good money to do it. So he went on tour, probably world tours with Rod Stewart, and it kind of fizzled away, the Bandits, and, you know, he had to go do his thing and, you know, get more famous. You know, he was with Rick Derringer for so long, and he loved that. So I don't blame him on that. I didn't like it because we were fixing to have a record out, you know, but I was going to mention one thing. We did this show. It's the first video show that was ever done. It was called Hollywood Heartbeat. We were on a show with the Vapors, the Plimsolls, the Go-Go's, David Bowie, and the Bandits. We all did the same show. We're all in the studio the same time. And that was, I thought we had it. I thought we were gonna make it big, and we knew we were having our record coming out, and, you know, we were gonna be stars, and, you know, I'd have a worldwide record with Danny Johnson, and, you know, things sometimes don't work out. You just get through it and you keep on going, and he's the best three-piece guitar player that you could ever play with. He was so full. He made everything, but of course, like, together, we played together. It wasn't just a drummer and a guitar player. It was like we were together. I mean, look, the first Bandits, we played, and we were never off. We were on the road. We wouldn't even have enough time to take showers sometimes getting in the cities that we were playing. We'd just get up there and start playing. It was just one after another.
Down to Texas from South Louisiana, on tour with the boys in the hard rock band. Shadows, they were dancing in the Bible black night. It looked like some girls to the boys' delight. When we asked, what's your name? One said, I'm Pleasure, and the other said, you can call me Pain. Pleasure and Pain. Pleasure was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl with a face like an angel from a distant world. Pain, dressed in black, had the body to boot. Rings on her fingers and a bunch of tattoos. When we asked, what's your name? One said, I'm Pleasure, and the other said, you can call me Pain. Pleasure and Pain. So I babysitted Pain and I taught her how to drive. Everybody's looking for the same good time, so we headed down to Magic Street on a carpet ride. When we asked, what's your name? One said, I'm Pleasure, and the other said, you can call me Pain. Pleasure and Pain. Sweet sugar cane, pleasure and pain.
Those days he was like a modern kind of player. You know, he had blues roots. He played like rock, and his solos were really well thought out. But they, even though they were spontaneous most of the time, you know, he had a great sound. He looked great. You know, he had all the elements of what a great guitar player, like a guitar hero, would have in those days. You know, he had a good sound on the guitar. You know, that's a lot of it too. You know, guitar players that don't have a good sound, forget it, sucks. They always had a good sound. You know, I remember seeing a giant billboard on Sunset Boulevard, Derringer, with my brother's name up there. I said, that motherfucker, I never had one of those.
Okay.